I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good morning, everybody. Mark, a.k.a. the Controversial Christian, coming to you on this beautiful 12th day of March 2021. I almost said third day. Getting behind here. How's everybody today? It's a beautiful day. We're going to talk a little bit about Ulysses Grant today as our American History Month continues. First of all, I want to start with our reading here. I kind of lost my train of thought here. Ever since I had this COVID, man, my thoughts have been they're coming back a little bit, but today's the 12th. Wow. One more day, it would have been Friday the 13th. It's Friday the 12th, though. Okay, we're still in Lent, too. Grant to me, O Lord, to know what I ought to know, to love what I ought to love, to praise what delights you most, to value what is precious in your sight, to hate what is offensive to you. Do not suffer me to judge according to the sight of my eyes, nor to pass sentence according to the hearing of ignorant men, but to discern with true judgment between things visible and spiritual, and above all things to inquire what is the good pleasure of your will. Amen. Let's see what we got for our reading today here. Nothing else matters. There's a song about that. Nothing else matters. What then shall we say to these things? If God is for us, who can be against us? That's from Romans 8:31. March Madness is here. How we love to fill the stands and shout cheers for our team and jeers against our opponent. Everyone knows which team fans are for and who are against by the colors they wear and the cheers they chant. Today, Paul asks us to consider the fact that God is our greatest fan. The question is, if God is for us, who can be against us? In other words, because God is for us, it doesn't matter who or what is against us. No one can take away our salvation. No one can shut off God's love for you or foil God's plan for you. If anyone were able to do any of those things, he or she would have to be greater than God himself. Even the powers of hell may set themselves against you, but they will not prevail. Why? Because God is greater and he is on your side. In his question, God is assuming a positive answer. If God be for us, no one can be against us. If God be for us, nothing else matters. It is not wonderful news to believe that salvation lies outside ourselves. Martin Luther said that. Well, Biden finally passed that COVID bill. He signed it yesterday, I believe it was. Now, most of us are going to be getting $1,400 checks. And I see on the news this morning, people are still having trouble getting unemployment. I think I signed up for unemployment one time in my life. Back in the 70s or 80s it was. I got one or two checks, but I always managed to find a job because I hated sitting around doing nothing. You know, that's just the opposite of things today. I mean, some of these people just sit around and they play on these computers or, these games all the time and they do nothing. And then they wonder why they have nothing. And they're out begging for stuff, Get a little ambition. Go out and do a little something for the world instead of worrying about protesting this and that. All right, let's talk a little bit about Ulysses Grant. He was our 18th president, and his picture is also on one of my favorite bills, the $50 bill. Of course, now my other favorite one is Ben Franklin. He's on the 100. And they've got the 500 and the 1,000. I've seen a $500 bill when I was a kid. My uncle had one. But I've never seen a $1,000 bill. They're not in circulation anymore. Neither is a 500. Which, that's mostly for business deals and like that. But anyways, Ulysses Grant, he was born in 1822 and he died in 1885. He commanded the victorious Union Army during the American Civil War. That was from 1861 to 1865. And he was 18th president from 1869 to 1877. He was an Ohio native and he graduated from West Point and fought in the Mexican-American War from 1846 to 1848. What is that saying? Never forget the Alamo. During the Civil War, Grant was an aggressive and determined leader, was given command of the U.S. Army. After the war, he became a national hero, and the Republicans nominated him for president in 1868. A primary focus of his administration was Reconstruction, and he worked to reconcile the North and the South while also attempting to protect the civil rights of newly freed black slaves. While he was personally honest, some of his associates were corrupt and his administration was tarnished by various scandals. Gee, that sound familiar? Como. Well, anyway, I know it's not funny. These people, they get all this power and they got all this money and everything. They think they're invincible, and look what happens. Boom. After retiring, he invested in a brokerage firm that went bankrupt, costing him his life savings. He spent his final days penning his memoirs, which were published the year he died and proved a critical and financial success. He was born in Point Pleasant, Ohio, April 27, 1822. The following years, he moved with his parents, Jesse Grant and Hannah Simpson Grant, to Georgetown, Ohio, where his father ran a tannery. In 1839, Jesse Grant arranged for his son's admission to the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. The congressman who appointed Grant mistakenly believed his first name was Ulysses and his middle name was Simpson, his mother's maiden name. Grant never amended the error, went on to accept Ulysses S. Grant as his real name, although the S didn't stand for anything. I think his first real name was Hiram, I believe is what it was. Yeah, somewhere around here it says that. Okay. Anyways, let's carry on here. In 1843, he graduated from West Point. He was known as a skilled horseman, but an otherwise undistinguished student. After seeing action in the Mexican-American War, he returned to Missouri and married Julia in August 1848. The couple eventually had 4 children. In the early years of his marriage, he was assigned to a series of remote army posts, some of them on the West Coast, which kept him separated from his family. In 1854, he resigned from the military. Now a civilian, he was reunited with his family at White Haven, Missouri plantation where Julia had grown up. There he made an unsuccessful attempt at farming, followed by a failed stint in a St. Louis real estate office. In 1860, the family moved to Galena, Illinois, where Ulysses worked in his father's leather goods business. After the Civil War began in 1861, he became a colonel of the 21st Illinois Volunteers. Later that summer, President Abraham Lincoln made Grant a brigadier general. Grant's first major victory came in February 1862, when his troops captured Fort Donelson in Tennessee. When a Confederate general in charge of the fort asked about terms of surrender for the Battle of Fort Donelson, Grant famously replied, "No terms except an unconditional and immediate surrender can be accepted." In 1863, in July of 1863, Grant's forces captured Vicksburg, Mississippi, a Confederate stronghold. Grant, who was earning a reputation as a tenacious and determined leader, was appointed lieutenant general by Lincoln on March 10, 1864, and given command of all U.S. armies. He led a series of campaigns that ultimately wore down the Confederate Army and helped bring the deadliest conflict in U.S. history close to a close. On April 9th, 1865, Confederate General Robert E. Lee surrendered to Grant at a Poppet courthouse in Virginia, effectively ending the Civil War. 5 days later, on April 14th, Lincoln was assassinated by Confederate sympathizer John Wilkes Booth, while attending a play at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. Grant and his wife had been invited to accompany the president that night, but declined in order to visit family. Following the war, Grant became a national hero, and in 1866 was appointed America's first four-star general at the recommendation of President Andrew Johnson. By the summer of 1867, tensions were running high between Johnson and the radical Republicans in Congress, who favored a more aggressive approach to Reconstruction in the South. The president removed a vocal critic of his policy, Secretary of War Edwin Stanton, from the cabinet and replaced him with Grant. Congress charged that Johnson was in violation of the Tenure of Office Act and demanded Stanton's reinstatement. In January 1868, Grant resigned the war post, thereby breaking with Johnson, who was later impeached but acquitted by a single vote in May of 1868. Boy, that was close, huh? That same month, the Republicans nominated Grant as their presidential candidate, selecting Schuyler Colfax, a U.S. congressman from Indiana, as his running mate. The Democrats chose former Governor Horatio Seymour as their presidential nominee, paired with Francis Blair, a U.S. congressman from Missouri. In the general election, Grant won by electoral margin of 214 to 80 and received more than 52% of the popular vote. At age 46, he became the youngest president-elect in U.S. history. He entered the White House in the middle of the Reconstruction era, a tumultuous period in which the 11 southern states that seceded before or at the start of the Civil War were brought back into the Union. As president, Grant tried to foster a peaceful reconciliation between the North and South. He supported pardons for former Confederate leaders while also attempting to protect the civil rights of freed slaves. In 1870, the 15th Amendment, which gave black men the right to vote, was ratified. Grant signed legislation aimed at limiting the activities of white terrorist groups like the KKK that use violence to intimidate blacks and prevent them from voting. At various times, Grant stationed federal troops throughout the South to maintain law and order. Critics charged that Grant's actions violated states' rights, while others contended that the president did not do enough to protect freedom. In addition to focusing on Reconstruction, Grant signed legislation establishing the Department of Justice, the Weather Bureau, now known as the National Weather Service, and Yellowstone National Park, America's first national park. He also tried with limited success to improve conditions for Native Americans. Grant's administration made strides in foreign policy by negotiating the 1871 Treaty of Washington, which settled U.S. claims against England stemming from the activities of British-built Confederate warships that disrupted northern shipping during the Civil War. The treaty resulted in improved relations between the United Kingdom and the United States. Less successful was Grant's failed attempt to annex the Caribbean nation of Santo Domingo, present-day Domingo Republican. In 1872, a group of Republicans who opposed Grant's policies and believed he was corrupt formed the Liberal Republican Party. The group nominated New York newspaper editor Horace Greeley as their presidential candidate. Democrats also nominated Greeley, hoping a combined support would defeat Grant. Instead, the president and his running mate, Henry Wilson, a U.S. Senator from Massachusetts, won the general election by an electoral margin of 286 to 66. Wow. And received close to 56% of the popular vote. And during his second term, he had to contend with a lengthy and severe depression that struck the nation. He also continued to grapple with issues related to Reconstruction. He did not seek a third term, and Republican Rutherford Hayes, the governor of Ohio, won the presidency in 1876. His time in office was marked by scandals and corruption, although he himself did not participate in or profit from the misdeeds perpetuated by some of his associates and appointees. During his first term, a group of speculators led by James Fisk and Jay Gould attempted to influence the government and manipulated the gold market. The failed plot resulted in financial panic on September 24, 1869, known as Black Friday. Even though Grant was not directly involved in the scheme, his reputation suffered because he had become personally associated with Fisk and Gould prior to the scandal. After leaving the White House in March of 1877, Grant and his family embarked on a 2-year trip around the world, during which they met with dignitaries and cheering crowds in many countries they visited. In the 1880 Republican National Convention, a group of delegates voted to nominate Grant for president again. However, James Garfield, a U.S. congressman from Ohio, ultimately earned the nomination. He would go on to win the election and become the 20th president before being assassinated in 1881. And they sure were assassinated a lot of presidents back then, didn't they? In 1881, Grant bought a brownstone in New York City's Upper East Side. He invested his savings in a financial firm in which his son was a partner. However, the firm's other partner swindled its investors, causing the business to collapse and bankrupting Grant. To provide for his family, the former president decided to write his memoirs. In 1884, he was diagnosed with throat cancer. He died at age 63 on July 23, 1885, in Mount Gregor, New York, in the Adirondacks Mountains, where he and his family were spending the summer. His memoirs, published that same year by his friend Mark Twain, became a major financial success. More than 1 million people gathered in New York City to witness Grant's funeral procession. The former president was laid to rest in a tomb in New York City's Riverside Park. When Julia Grant died, his wife, in 1902, she was buried beside her husband. Here's a couple of his famous quotes. In every battle, there comes a time when both sides consider themselves beaten. Then he who continues the attack wins. I have never advocated war except as a means of peace. Well, there you have it. A little bit about one of our famous American people, Ulysses S. Grant. Now, we're going to end with our closing prayer. Blessed Father God, may we show ourselves to be faithful. Our effort here is brief. The reward is eternal. May the excitements of the world vanish like a shadow and not disturb us. Amen. Amen, everybody. Oh, man, this world's a crazy place. I see on the news that they're talking about President Biden, about this vaccinations and like that. But what a lot of people fail to realize is that Donald Trump is the one that initiated all this. And Biden seems to be swooping in, him and Kamala Harris, and taking all the credit for this. When actually it was Donald Trump as the one that's got all the research and everything sped through the federal channels and like that. But you see, they're not mentioning anything about that because a lot of them hate Donald Trump. I think a lot of the reason why they hate him is because he knows some of their secrets and he can expose them. Eventually he'll come out, though, sooner or later. I mean, I don't really hate anybody. I don't condemn anybody. But, I mean, these people are bickering amongst each other, and they've been doing it for years. Your job as a politician is to work for the American people. That's us, the American people. You pass some of these dumb laws, that favor just certain people and not all the people, Your job as a politician is to take care of everybody, not just a few certain people. Like, You're letting these people from these foreign countries come in here. You know, they're not being checked for COVID, and they're getting all these free benefits and everything when they come in. I mean, what's the matter with you people? You know, I can understand, you know, that, you know, you screen these people and you check them, you do a background check, and you put them somewhere until they check out, not just let them run through the country, you know. And then, you know, you'll give them welfare like that, but you won't do this for your own people. You know, and this stuff has got to stop. You know, this president we got now, he's acting like an idiot. I mean, you know, he takes care of his family first, so why don't take care of your family first, Mr. President? You know, the American people, the people that have put sweat into this country to build it, the people whose forefathers died for this country, these people that are coming from down to these foreign countries and like that, you know, a lot of their ancestors didn't die for freedom. You know, they're just coming up here and mooching off of our generosity because you're foolish enough to let them do it. You know, this is going to become known as the United States of welfare. It's not going to be, you know, people are laughing at us. You know, they think we're a bunch of clowns because we got a bunch of clowns running this country. You know, wake up. You know, we ain't going to have a country pretty soon. All right, now I've said enough. I've said my piece. I wish everybody a blessed day. We love you, and we'll see you again tomorrow. This is a Controversial Christian signing off.